Remember to subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories. Emily had been rushing all morning. Her alarm hadn't gone off, her coffee had spilled, and the subway had been delayed. By the time she arrived at her downtown apartment, she could feel her heart pounding, not from excitement, but sheer exhaustion. All she wanted was a hot shower, her pajamas, and a moment to breathe. As she fumbled through her bag for her keys, a sinking feeling set in. Her keys weren't there. Panic rose in her chest. She checked her pockets again. Nothing. She cursed under her breath. Not today, she whispered. She scanned the hallway, hoping maybe she'd dropped them earlier. But the hallway was empty, silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. Emily realized she was locked out. Her mind raced. Her phone buzzed. Texts from coworkers, reminders, a missed call from her mother, but none of that helped her now. She considered calling a locksmith, but it was already late afternoon, and they would take at least an hour. And she had plans tonight, plans she couldn't miss. The thought of sitting on the stoop, staring at her building and feeling utterly helpless, made her stomach twist. Then she remembered her neighbor, Mr. Russo, who lived 2 floors up. He was a quiet man, always impeccably dressed, with a calm demeanor that suggested he didn't tolerate nonsense. Emily hesitated. He had always seemed mysterious. But she had no choice. She rang his bell. The door opened almost instantly, and Emily was met with the sight of a man who could only be described as cinematic. Dark suit, intense eyes, a presence that filled the room before she even stepped inside. He didn't speak at first, just regarded her silently. Locked out? He asked, his voice smooth, with a hint of amusement. Emily nodded, cheeks flushing. Yes. I can't get into my apartment. He smiled faintly. Come in. It's warmer inside than in the hallway. His apartment was unlike anything Emily had ever seen. Tall ceilings, marble floors, art that looked like it belonged in a gallery. The kind of place you didn't just stumble into by accident. As Emily stepped in, the air seemed to shift. She felt both nervous and strangely at ease. The man, whose name she learned was Dominic, motioned to a chair. Sit. Relax. You've had a rough day. Emily tried to collect herself. Thank you. I didn't expect. Dominic raised a hand, cutting her off gently. Expect what? Life is unpredictable. You're going to be fine. I have wine. Would you like a glass? Emily blinked. Wine. In a stranger's apartment. Her first instinct was caution, but something about his calm, confident aura made her nod. Yes, that would be nice. He poured the wine with deliberate care, sliding the glass across to her. Emily took it, feeling the warmth of the liquid spread through her hands. It was exquisite wine, the kind she only ever imagined drinking on special occasions. She swirled it, savoring the bouquet, and for a moment, forgot about her locked apartment, the missed deadlines, the chaos outside. Dominic leaned back, his eyes observing her as if reading every thought she didn't voice. Emily felt a strange connection, uneasy, thrilling, and utterly intoxicating. She realized she was smiling, despite everything, and that smile didn't fade even when she remembered she was technically a stranger in his apartment. You're a long way from home, Dominic said after a moment, voice low. Yes, I guess I am, Emily admitted, a blush creeping across her cheeks. Sometimes, being out of place is exactly where we're supposed to be, he said. And then, just as quickly, he added, almost as an afterthought, tonight, you're safe here. Drink. Relax. Forget the chaos outside, if only for an hour. Emily took another sip of her wine, and for the first time that day, the tension in her shoulders began to loosen. Outside, the city hummed with life, indifferent to her troubles. Inside Dominic's apartment, time seemed to slow. As she looked around, she couldn't help but notice little details. The subtle scent of cologne, the faint hum of music she couldn't identify, the way the light caught the crystal on the shelves. Everything was perfect, almost unreal. And then it hit her. Who exactly was Dominic? There was a gravity about him that suggested he wasn't just a man living quietly in an apartment upstairs. Her curiosity was piqued, but she knew better than to ask. Not yet. For now, she would sip her wine, enjoy the warmth, and let herself breathe. By the time she finished the first glass, an hour had almost passed. Emily had gone from panicked and stressed to calm and surprisingly intrigued. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to take a turn she never could have anticipated. Emily sipped the last of her wine and set the glass down on the polished marble table. The warmth from the drink still lingered in her chest, and a sense of calm she hadn't felt all day settled over her. She glanced around Dominic's apartment again, her curiosity growing with every passing second. The walls were adorned with large, striking paintings, each one seeming to tell a story. The shelves were lined with rare books, leather-bound and well-worn, and the faint scent of aged wood mixed with a subtle hint of sandalwood cologne. Dominic noticed her interest and raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You seem fascinated," he remarked casually. Emily laughed softly, a little embarrassed. "It's different from what I'm used to. Everything here feels luxurious, but in a quiet, controlled way. Not flashy, just precise. That's one way to put it," Dominic said, leaning back in his chair. His presence was magnetic, commanding attention without even trying. Emily couldn't help but feel slightly intimidated, yet oddly safe at the same time. There was a moment of silence, comfortable yet charged, before Dominic stood and walked toward a sleek cabinet in the corner. He returned with another bottle of wine, this one darker, with a label that looked expensive enough to make Emily's eyes widen. "I think you deserve a second glass," he said, uncorking it effortlessly. Emily hesitated for a fraction of a second but then nodded. Something about his confidence, his calm demeanor, made her feel she could trust him, at least for now. He poured her a fresh glass, the liquid shimmering in the soft light. They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in thought. Emily found herself stealing glances at him, noticing how his eyes seemed to hold secrets, stories of a life she could only imagine. And yet, despite the mystery, there was a softness in his expression when he looked at her, a kind of quiet curiosity that made her heart flutter. Finally, Dominic spoke. "You must be wondering why I live like this, on my own. Some people call it isolation. I prefer to think of it as selective company." His gaze was intense but not threatening. "Tonight, you're part of that company. Consider this an invitation." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Selective company? You mean like friends?" she asked cautiously. "Something like that," he replied, his lips curling into a small smile. "But sometimes, company is more about timing than familiarity. You were locked out, yes, but perhaps that's how you ended up here. Timing can be very instructive." Emily blinked, unsure how to respond. She didn't know what to say to a man who seemed to speak in riddles and yet felt completely approachable. She took another sip of her wine, letting the warmth ground her. Dominic moved closer, sitting on the edge of the sofa opposite her. "I don't usually do this," he said slowly, "invite strangers in, offer them drinks. But there's something about you, your energy, your presence, it's rare." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "I'd like you to stay for a little while longer. No rush. No obligations." Emily's heart raced. She wasn't sure whether to feel flattered, nervous, or both. I don't want to impose," she said quietly. "You're not," he assured her, his voice soft yet firm. "Besides, it's not often I meet someone who can match the pace of the city outside, who doesn't immediately judge the quiet moments in life." Emily looked around again, realizing how easy it was to lose track of time here. The city outside was a blur of lights and noise, but inside, there was a sense of control, of calm, that she couldn't resist. She smiled, a genuine smile that surprised her. Maybe I'll stay a little longer," she admitted. Dominic's smile widened ever so slightly. "Good choice." He poured himself a glass of wine and raised it in a subtle toast. "To unexpected moments," he said. Emily clinked her glass against his, and for a moment, everything else faded. The stress of the day, the locked apartment, the chaos outside. It was just the two of them, sharing a quiet connection that felt both thrilling and dangerous. They talked then, slowly at first. Dominic asked about her work, her life in the city, her dreams and frustrations. Emily was surprised at how easy it was to open up to him, how natural it felt to share small details with someone she barely knew. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye, something powerful, almost untouchable. Hours seemed to pass unnoticed. Emily laughed more than she had in weeks, sharing stories of her clumsy mornings, her misadventures with coworkers, and the small moments that made her life unpredictable. Dominic listened, genuinely interested, interjecting occasionally with witty remarks or thoughtful questions that made her think deeper. At one point, Emily realized she had completely forgotten about her apartment, her keys, and the stress that had consumed her only an hour ago. The panic that had gripped her earlier had melted away, replaced by a strange sense of comfort and intrigue. She found herself glancing at Dominic, noticing the subtle confidence in the way he moved, the intensity in his gaze, and the quiet charm that made her pulse quicken. Then, just as she was settling into the rhythm of the evening, Dominic leaned back and studied her carefully. "You're curious, aren't you?" he asked, almost as if reading her mind. Emily's cheeks flushed. I guess I am. "You shouldn't be ashamed of curiosity," he said. "It's a dangerous world, Emily, but it's also a world full of opportunities. Knowing when to trust, and when to be cautious, that's the real challenge." Emily nodded, unsure whether he was speaking metaphorically or literally. Something about the weight of his words sent a thrill through her, a mixture of excitement and unease. She realized she was drawn to him in a way she couldn't quite explain, dangerous, intoxicating, and impossible to ignore. As the night deepened, Dominic poured another glass of wine. Emily hesitated, then took it, feeling the smooth liquid soothe her nerves. She realized she was no longer the frantic woman outside her locked apartment. She had become someone entirely new, someone immersed in a world she had never imagined existed. Dominic raised his glass once more. "To new experiences," he said softly. Emily clinked her glass against his, and in that quiet toast, a silent understanding passed between them, a promise of more to come, and a night that neither of them would forget. Emily took another sip of her wine, feeling a warmth that was more than just physical. Dominic's presence had a strange, magnetic pull, drawing her into a world she hadn't known existed. The apartment, with its soft lighting and elegant furnishings, suddenly felt like a universe of its own, an escape from the chaos of the city and her usual routine. Dominic leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers. "You know," he said slowly, "most people don't notice the details that make a place significant. They walk through life without seeing the texture of it. But you see." Emily blinked, caught off guard by his observation. I guess I do notice things. It's just instinct, I think." She felt a thrill at the thought that he had noticed her noticing. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her pulse quicken, a careful mixture of curiosity and quiet command. He smiled faintly. "Instinct can be very revealing." He paused, then stood and walked toward a side table, returning with a small, black envelope. "I want to show you something. It's not something I usually share, but tonight seems like the right night." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what to expect. His world was already enigmatic, but this gesture hinted at something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface of his polished, controlled exterior. She nodded slowly, a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. Dominic handed her the envelope. "Open it," he instructed. Emily carefully removed the seal and pulled out a few photographs. Her eyes widened. They were pictures of the city, streets, buildings, faces, but there was something unusual about them. They weren't casual snapshots. Each image was precise, deliberate, as though someone had been watching, recording, and studying the world in a way Emily couldn't quite comprehend. "These are recent?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very recent," Dominic replied, his tone calm but firm. "I pay attention to what most people overlook. Knowledge, control, understanding. They're not just words to me. They are tools. And sometimes, the right knowledge can save a life, or change it." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. She realized that she was not just in a luxurious apartment, she was in the domain of someone who operated on an entirely different level. His power was subtle yet palpable, and for the first time, she understood that this man was not just wealthy or successful, he commanded respect, fear, and loyalty in equal measure. Yet, despite the undertone of danger, there was something undeniably captivating about him. She couldn't look away. Why show me this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Dominic studied her, his eyes darkening. Because you're not like most people. You notice. You feel. You question. And tonight, I want you to see that there's more to life than what you've been allowed to experience. Emily felt a rush of conflicting emotions: fear, curiosity, excitement. She knew instinctively that crossing further into his world was risky, but the pull was irresistible. She looked up at him, her voice soft but steady. And what if I'm not ready for that world? He smiled, leaning closer, his presence enveloping her. You don't have to be ready. Sometimes, life doesn't give us a choice. It just happens. And all we can do is decide whether to embrace it. The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Emily felt a flutter in her chest, an awareness that this encounter would change everything. She sipped her wine, trying to calm the sudden rush of adrenaline, and found herself leaning back in her chair, captivated by his every movement. Dominic moved toward the window, looking out at the city skyline. Look at it, he said, his voice low. The city never sleeps, never stops moving, but within it, there are places and people most will never see. I've learned to navigate that world. And sometimes, I find those who are willing to step beyond their ordinary lives. Emily followed his gaze, the city lights stretching endlessly before her. It was beautiful, chaotic, alive. And yet, it felt contained somehow, like she was viewing it through a lens only he could control. She realized she was starting to understand why he had invited her here, not merely for company, but to offer her a glimpse behind the curtain of a life she had never imagined. Dominic turned back toward her, his expression unreadable. There's something about tonight, about meeting you, about this moment, that feels significant. You could walk out the door, go back to your ordinary life, or you could stay, and see where this leads. Emily's mind raced. She had always been cautious, always played it safe. But something about him, about this night, made her question that caution. The locked door that had brought her here suddenly seemed like fate, a push into a world she wasn't sure she was ready for, but desperately wanted to explore. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Her hands fidgeted slightly, betraying the excitement and nervousness she tried to mask. You don't have to say anything, Dominic replied. He took a slow step closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. Actions speak louder than words. Stay, if you want. There's no judgment here, only possibilities. Emily felt her breath catch. The room seemed to shrink around them, the soft lighting, the polished floors, the quiet hum of the city outside, all conspiring to make her feel that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She looked at Dominic, her heart pounding, and realized that she didn't want to leave. Not yet. Okay, she whispered, almost to herself. I'll stay. Dominic's eyes softened ever so slightly, and he offered her a small, genuine smile. Good, he said simply. Tonight is just the beginning. They sat together in silence for a while, the quiet punctuated only by the occasional sip of wine and the distant hum of traffic below. Emily's mind wandered, thinking about the strange twist of fate that had brought her here, locked out, stressed, anxious, and how it had led to this moment of unexpected calm and thrilling anticipation. As the night deepened, Emily realized that she was beginning to trust Dominic in a way that frightened and excited her at the same time. She didn't know where this connection would lead, but she knew, deep down, that her life was about to change forever. And somehow, she welcomed it. Emily sat back in the plush sofa, her glass of wine half empty, her mind racing with thoughts she didn't quite understand. Dominic's presence was magnetic, commanding, and the more she noticed him, the more she realized he wasn't just a man of wealth, he was a man of power, of influence, someone whose world moved differently than hers. She felt both intimidated and drawn to him, a mixture of fear and fascination that made her pulse race. Dominic leaned against the window, looking out at the city skyline. The lights stretched endlessly, each window flickering with someone else's life, someone else's story. You see that? He asked quietly, his voice almost a whisper. Every one of those lives is moving, chasing, struggling. And yet most people never notice the paths that intersect, the decisions that shape everything. Emily watched him, intrigued. You notice those things? She asked, curiosity lacing her tone. I do, he replied, turning toward her. His gaze was intense, penetrating, as though he could see through her very thoughts. Not everyone pays attention. Not everyone is capable of seeing the patterns. But you notice. And that's why you're here, isn't it? Emily's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to read her so clearly. I guess so, she admitted, feeling suddenly vulnerable under his scrutiny. Dominic smiled faintly, a small, enigmatic curve of his lips that made Emily's stomach flutter. Good, he said simply. Because tonight, I want to show you something. Not just the world as it appears, but the world as it really is. Before she could respond, he moved to a sideboard and pulled out a small keycard, sleek and black. Emily's eyes widened. What's that for? She asked, a mix of curiosity and apprehension in her voice. You'll see, Dominic said, his tone calm, deliberate. This, he held up the keycard, gives access to places most people will never step foot in. And tonight, you're going to see one of them. Emily's pulse quickened. Part of her screamed caution. She didn't know this man, she didn't understand his world, and yet another part of her felt exhilarated. The city outside her apartment had always felt mundane, predictable, safe. But here, with Dominic, she sensed danger, excitement, and a thrill she had never experienced. He gestured for her to follow. The apartment had another door she hadn't noticed before, hidden behind a heavy curtain. With a subtle swipe of the keycard, the door unlocked, revealing a private elevator. The interior was sleek, high-tech, and smelled faintly of polished metal and fresh leather. Emily stepped inside, her heart hammering in her chest. Where are we going? She asked softly, unable to hide the mixture of fear and excitement in her voice. Somewhere you've never been, Dominic replied with a small smile. And somewhere you'll remember. The elevator moved silently, descending several floors beneath the city. Emily pressed herself slightly closer to Dominic, who didn't flinch. He merely glanced at her with that intense, unreadable expression, his calm demeanor oddly reassuring. When the doors opened, Emily's eyes widened in astonishment. They were in a large underground space, dimly lit but elegant, with walls lined in dark wood and marble. The room was filled with sophisticated gadgets, communication equipment, and a sense of authority that made her realize this was no ordinary apartment. This was a command center, a place where important decisions were made, where power was exercised quietly but decisively. This is your world, Emily whispered. Odd. Part of it, Dominic replied. I keep this separate from the rest of the city, from the noise above. Here, things are controlled. Precise. Efficient. But even here, there's chaos lurking. Waiting for the right moment. Emily felt a thrill, tinged with fear. She realized that she had crossed a threshold, entering a world she had only glimpsed in movies or read about in novels. And yet, she didn't want to leave. Something about Dominic's confidence, his command of the space, and the sheer allure of mystery drew her in irresistibly. Dominic walked past the consoles, gesturing for her to follow. I wanted to show you this, because you need to understand what it's like to operate in a world where every decision matters. Where timing, perception, and intuition can be the difference between success and failure. Emily tried to process it all. Her life had always been orderly in its chaos. Her apartment, her job, her routines, but this was different. Every detail in this underground room spoke of meticulous planning, authority, and influence. She realized that Dominic was not just a man of means, he was a man of strategy, someone who shaped his world with precision and intention. You're probably wondering why I brought you here, Dominic said, his eyes fixed on hers. You could have left anytime, returned to your safe, ordinary life. And yet you stayed. That tells me something important about you. Emily's cheeks flushed. I don't know what to say, she admitted. I'm fascinated, yes, but also intimidated. Good, he said softly. Intimidation is natural, but fascination, that's what drives people to grow, to see beyond the ordinary, to step into moments they never imagined. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the hum of the underground systems filling the air. Emily realized she had been holding her breath, overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation, the allure of Dominic's world, and the undeniable tension between them. Dominic finally stepped closer, his presence enveloping her. Tonight, you've seen only a glimpse, he said, his voice low, almost hypnotic. There's more to come. More choices, more revelations, more moments that will test who you are and what you're willing to embrace. Emily's heart raced. She felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and anticipation that made the world above seem trivial. For the first time, she felt truly alive, not just surviving, but awake to the possibilities of a life that was thrilling, dangerous, and intoxicating. Are you going to let me go back now? She asked, a nervous laugh escaping her. Dominic smiled faintly, a mixture of amusement and admiration in his eyes. You could go back, but after tonight, nothing will feel the same. The door you walked through outside, it locked you out of your old life and opened the door to this one. And somehow, I think you know you wouldn't want to go back. Emily swallowed hard. He was right. Somehow, deep inside, she knew she didn't want to leave. Not yet. Not when this world, this man, and this moment held so much promise, so much danger, and so much intrigue. The underground space was quiet now, the hum of the city far above them. Emily realized that she was standing on the edge of a new reality, one that would test her limits, challenge her instincts, and awaken desires she hadn't acknowledged before. And she couldn't deny it. She wanted to see where this night, this connection, and this enigmatic man would take her next. Emily stood in the underground chamber, her heart pounding, still trying to process everything she had just seen. Dominic's world was nothing like the one she had known. This wasn't just about wealth or luxury, it was power, influence, and control, all woven together with an elegance that both intimidated and fascinated her. The hum of the machinery and the soft, ambient lights made the space feel almost otherworldly. Dominic approached her slowly, his gaze unwavering. You're thinking too much, he said, his voice low, yet firm. Sometimes, you have to act, even when your mind screams to pause. Emily hesitated, unsure what he meant. Her instincts, trained by years of routine and caution, told her to step back, to retreat to the safety of the ordinary life she had known. But there was something magnetic about Dominic, something in the way he commanded the room, the way he spoke, that made her want to follow him, even into the unknown. He extended his hand. Come, he said simply. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for his. The contact was electric, sending a jolt of anticipation through her body. She realized, almost reluctantly, that she was stepping beyond the point of no return. Dominic led her through a series of hallways she hadn't noticed before, each turn revealing more of his hidden world, rooms filled with state-of-the-art technology, private offices with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and walls adorned with photographs of people she didn't recognize, all looking ordinary yet somehow important. You see, Dominic explained, most people live their lives oblivious to what surrounds them. They pass by power, opportunity, and danger without ever noticing. But you notice. And noticing changes everything. Emily absorbed his words, feeling a mixture of awe and trepidation. She had always prided herself on being observant, but nothing in her life had prepared her for the magnitude of Dominic's influence. She felt both terrified and exhilarated, a contradiction that made her pulse race. They entered a large room, dimly lit, with a long table in the center. On it lay documents, laptops, and a few small, inconspicuous items that she couldn't identify. Dominic gestured for her to sit. This is where decisions are made. Every choice has consequences, some visible, some hidden. You are about to see the depth of responsibility that comes with knowing more than others. Emily perched on the edge of a chair, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly as she watched him move with confidence and purpose. He picked up a folder and flipped it open, revealing photographs, reports, and handwritten notes. Emily's eyes widened. The level of detail, the precision, was staggering. This, Dominic said, gesturing to the documents, is my life. Not just the luxury, not just the appearances, but the reality behind it. Every action, every connection, every moment, calculated, anticipated, controlled. Emily swallowed hard. She had expected intrigue, danger, maybe even a hint of romance, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. She felt a thrill mixed with a deep, almost primal fear. She realized she was in the presence of someone who operated on a level far beyond her own, and yet she was inexplicably drawn to him. Dominic noticed her reaction. I don't mean to overwhelm you, he said, his voice softer now. But understanding is part of trust. If you are going to stay in this world, you need to see it fully, without illusions. Emily nodded, feeling a flush on her cheeks. I think I understand, she said, though she knew she didn't. Not fully. And yet, the pull was undeniable. She had been drawn to him from the moment she walked into his apartment, and now that she had seen even a fraction of his world, leaving was no longer an option she wanted to consider. Dominic leaned back, studying her with those intense eyes that seemed to pierce through every hesitation. You've already made choices tonight, small ones, yes, but important. Each step you've taken brought you closer to understanding, and closer to me. Emily's breath caught. She realized he wasn't just talking about the world he controlled, he was talking about her, about the unspoken connection that had formed between them in just a few hours. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She had never felt such a combination of fear and desire, and it was exhilarating. Dominic, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what's happening. I've never experienced anything like this before. He stepped closer, his presence enveloping her. You're experiencing life, he said softly. Not the ordinary life you've known, but the life that exists beyond the comfort of routine. And you're ready for it. You just don't know it yet. Emily felt herself drawn into his orbit, her pulse racing, her thoughts scattered. She realized that in the span of a single evening, her world had shifted completely. The locked door that had trapped her outside her apartment had led her into a universe she had never imagined, one filled with power, danger, and a magnetic man who commanded her attention like no one ever had. Dominic reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, intimate, and Emily felt a warmth spread through her body that had nothing to do with the wine. Her breath caught, and for a moment, she felt unsteady, unsure whether to pull back or lean in. You're on the edge, he murmured. The edge of fear, desire, and possibility. The question is, will you step over, or will you retreat to safety? Emily's mind raced. She had always been cautious, always played it safe. But something inside her rebelled against the ordinary, against the predictable. She wanted to see what lay beyond the edge, to embrace the thrill, to follow this man into whatever world he inhabited. Slowly, deliberately, she reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. The contact was electric, sending a jolt of anticipation through both of them. Dominic's eyes darkened with approval, and he stepped even closer, reducing the distance between them to a mere whisper. Good, he said, his voice low and velvety. Tonight, this is just the beginning. There will be challenges, choices, and moments that test you. But if you're willing, if you're brave enough, you'll discover a world unlike any you've known. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She realized she had crossed a line, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. She had chosen to stay, to trust, to follow. And in doing so, she had opened herself to a life that was thrilling, dangerous, and intoxicating. The underground room, the lights, the documents, the soft hum of power, all of it faded into the background as she focused on him, on the pull between them, on the undeniable attraction and connection that had formed in mere hours. She knew one thing with certainty, her life had changed forever, and she didn't want it to go back to the way it was. Emily's mind was spinning as Dominic's world unfolded before her. Every step she had taken tonight, from being locked out of her apartment to now standing deep within the labyrinth of his underground domain, had been a collision of fear, curiosity, and undeniable fascination. Her pulse still raced, her senses heightened, and yet she felt a strange clarity, as if the chaos of her ordinary life had dissolved, leaving only the raw intensity of the moment. Dominic watched her closely, noting the subtle shifts in her expression, the way her eyes darted from the displays to the glowing city skyline far above. You're thinking too much again, he said softly, a small smile playing on his lips. Sometimes, Emily, the world is about seeing, not analyzing. Feeling, not judging. Emily blinked, caught off guard. I can't help it. Everything here, it's overwhelming. I don't know what's real and what's not. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them. It's all real, he said, his voice low and compelling. The danger, the control, the choices, the connection between us, it's real. That's why you feel it so strongly. You're not imagining it. You're alive to it. A shiver ran down Emily's spine. She had felt attraction before, curiosity before, but this intensity was unlike anything she had experienced. It was magnetic, consuming, and she realized that every instinct, every hesitation, was being tested. And yet, she didn't want to pull away. Dominic gestured toward a nearby console, sleek and brimming with activity. I want to show you something, he said. Emily followed, her eyes wide as he swiped through various files, maps, and communications. This is where the decisions are made, he explained. Every piece of information, every subtle action, can shift the balance of power. It's not a game, it's life. And sometimes, it's a dangerous life. Emily leaned in, scanning the documents with a mix of awe and apprehension. Each file revealed glimpses of Dominic's influence, the way he moved through networks, the people who relied on him, feared him, and trusted him. She realized that she was witnessing a man whose control over his world was absolute, yet invisible to the outside eye. Why are you showing me this? She asked softly, unsure if she wanted the answer. Because you're not ordinary, Dominic said, his gaze locking onto hers. You notice, you question, and you adapt. Most people would run the moment they saw this. But you stay. And staying changes everything. Emily felt a flush rise in her cheeks. I don't know if I'm ready for this, she admitted. I've never been part of anything like this before. It's intense. Dominic stepped closer, his presence enveloping her. You're ready, he said confidently. You just don't know it yet. But instincts like yours don't lie. You're drawn here for a reason. You have a part to play. Emily's heart pounded. She realized that by staying, by trusting him even a little, she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The safety of her ordinary life, the predictable routine, the familiar walls of her apartment, seemed distant, almost irrelevant. She had entered a world where danger, power, and desire intertwined, and she couldn't resist it. Dominic reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch sending an electric thrill through her. I could tell you stories, he murmured, about what it takes to survive in my world, about the people who trust me, and the people who oppose me. But words are never enough. Experience is what matters. Emily swallowed hard. She felt both nervous and exhilarated, knowing that whatever lay ahead would test her in ways she hadn't imagined. Yet, despite the fear, she wanted to experience it. She wanted to understand Dominic, his world, and herself in a way she had never done before. He leaned closer, his eyes dark and compelling. There are things about me, about this life, that you don't know yet. Secrets, shadows that walk alongside every light. You'll see them, and you'll understand that trust is rare, loyalty is priceless, and every choice has consequences. Emily's breath caught. And me, she whispered. Where do I fit into this? Dominic smiled faintly, the intensity in his gaze softening for the first time. You fit by being yourself. Observant, courageous, unafraid to step into the unknown. That's rare, Emily. That's why you're here. A moment of silence passed between them, filled with tension, anticipation, and the unspoken pull that had grown stronger with every interaction. Emily realized that she was drawn not just to his power, but to the man behind it, the calm, commanding presence who made her feel both safe and dangerously alive at the same time. Then, suddenly, the room shifted. A subtle alert on one of the consoles drew Dominic's attention. His posture changed, the soft confidence replaced by razor-sharp focus. Something's coming, he muttered, scanning the information. Not immediate danger, but something that requires my attention. Emily's pulse quickened. She had expected a night of intrigue, perhaps even romance, but the reality of Dominic's world was far more complex and perilous than she had imagined. Yet she didn't move away. She stood by his side, her curiosity and courage outweighing the flicker of fear that danced across her mind. Dominic's hand brushed hers, a fleeting contact that sent warmth through her. Stay close, he said, his tone calm but commanding. This is the part most people never see. The shadows that move behind the light, the choices that shape lives, it's all part of reality. Emily nodded, her chest tight with anticipation and excitement. She realized that in this moment, she was no longer just a visitor, she was part of the rhythm of his world, a silent witness to the balance of power, influence, and subtle danger that defined his life. The night deepened around them, both in the underground chamber and in the city above. Emily felt a thrill in knowing that she was on the edge of discovery, of understanding a life that was completely unlike her own. She had trusted Dominic, stepped into his world, and now, she was learning what it truly meant to exist beyond the ordinary. Dominic glanced at her, the intensity in his eyes softened by something almost vulnerable. "You've already changed tonight," he said quietly. "Not just by being here, but by seeing, feeling, and choosing. The next steps will test you even more. But I believe you're ready." Emily's heart raced. She felt fear, excitement, and an undeniable pull toward him, toward the unknown. She realized that by staying, by following this man into a world of secrets and shadows, she had opened herself to experiences she could never have imagined. And for the first time in her life, she didn't want to turn back. The hum of the underground systems, the soft glow of the lights, and the subtle tension between them created an atmosphere charged with possibility. Emily knew that the night was far from over, that challenges, revelations, and desires still awaited. And she welcomed it, all of it, with a courage she hadn't realized she possessed. Emily's pulse raced as she stood beside Dominic in the underground chamber. The night had been a whirlwind of revelations, intrigue, and unspoken attraction. From being locked out of her apartment just hours ago to now standing in a hidden world filled with power and influence, she felt simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. Every instinct told her she was on the edge of something extraordinary. Dominic's gaze softened as he looked at her. "You've come a long way tonight," he said, his voice low and compelling. "Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, you've stepped into my world, and you've done so with courage." Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry despite the wine she had sipped earlier. "I don't even know how to explain this, everything has happened so fast, and yet, it feels like it was meant to happen." Dominic's eyes darkened slightly, an intensity mixing with warmth. "Timing is rarely accidental," he said. "Sometimes, the universe, or life, guides us to moments, choices, and people who will change us. Tonight, Emily, this was one of those moments." She felt a shiver of anticipation, realizing he wasn't just talking about the events of the evening but about the undeniable connection that had grown between them. She had been drawn to him from the first moment, yet the reality of his world, the depth of his secrets, and the magnetic pull he exuded made the attraction almost irresistible. Dominic moved closer, his hand brushing hers again, and Emily felt a jolt of electricity run through her body. "There's one final thing I want to show you," he murmured. "One last experience tonight, before you decide whether to step further into this life or return to the ordinary." Emily nodded, her curiosity overpowering any lingering hesitation. She trusted him, enough to follow him, to experience this world firsthand, even without fully understanding the consequences. He led her through another corridor, this one lined with sleek black panels and soft lighting that gave the space an almost cinematic quality. At the end was a glass wall, revealing the city skyline in all its luminous splendor. The view took Emily's breath away, streets glimmering like veins of light, cars moving like streams of fire, and towering skyscrapers reflecting the night sky. Dominic stood beside her, his presence commanding yet comforting. "From here," he said softly, "you see the city as I see it, not just the chaos, but the patterns, the connections, the power that moves quietly beneath the surface. Most people live their lives unaware of it, blind to the forces that shape them. But you've seen it tonight. And that changes everything." Emily's heart swelled. She realized how small her world had felt before this night, how limited her understanding of life's possibilities had been. And now, standing here with Dominic, she felt alive in a way she never had before. Dominic turned to her, his eyes intense, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. "You've trusted me tonight," he said, his voice low and mesmerizing. "You've stepped into my world, embraced the unknown, and allowed yourself to feel. That's rare, and it's powerful." Emily felt her chest tighten. She had trusted him, yes, but more than that, she had felt a connection that went beyond words. Every glance, every touch, every subtle interaction had built a tension she couldn't ignore. She realized that she didn't want this night to end, not the experience, not the connection, and certainly not the man who had brought her here. Dominic reached out, taking her hand gently in his. There's a choice now, he said. You can go back to your life, the safe, familiar world you've always known, or you can stay. Stay with me, step into this life, and explore everything it has to offer. But know this, it won't be ordinary. It will be intense, challenging, and extraordinary. Emily's mind raced. She thought about her apartment, her routines, her safe life. And then she thought about Dominic, the hidden world he had revealed, the thrills, the danger, the magnetic pull of being part of something bigger, more alive. She realized that she had already crossed the threshold. Her fear had been replaced with curiosity, her hesitation replaced with desire. I want to stay, she whispered, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. I want to see everything. Dominic's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. Good, he said softly. That's all it takes. Courage, curiosity, and the willingness to embrace what's unknown. He stepped closer, the space between them charged with tension and anticipation. Emily felt a thrill run through her body, a mixture of fear and longing, as she realized how deeply she had been drawn to him. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. The connection between them was palpable, electric, and undeniable. Dominic brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering. Tonight is just the beginning, he murmured. There will be challenges, temptations, and choices that test everything you are. But if you embrace it, if you stay, you will discover a world beyond your imagination. Emily felt a shiver of anticipation and excitement. She had stepped into the unknown, faced her fears, and allowed herself to trust someone completely. And in that moment, she knew that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Dominic's hand found hers again, entwining their fingers. Are you ready? He asked, his voice low, commanding, yet tender. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the exhilaration course through her. Yes, she whispered. I'm ready. A subtle smile crossed Dominic's lips, one that was both approving and possessive. Then let's begin, he said. And with that, he guided her toward the elevator that would take them back to his luxurious penthouse, the night sky sprawling above them like a canvas of endless possibilities. As the elevator ascended, Emily realized that the locked door that had started this entire night was more than just a simple accident. It had been a gateway, a chance encounter that had led her into a world of power, mystery, and undeniable attraction. She had been given a choice, and she had chosen to embrace it. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped into the penthouse, sleek and breathtaking, overlooking the city lights that sparkled like diamonds. Dominic poured 2 glasses of wine, sliding one across to Emily. She took it, savoring the warmth and the moment, feeling as if the entire city belonged to them. Dominic raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said, his eyes locking onto hers. Emily clinked her glass gently against his. To new beginnings, she echoed, her heart full of excitement, fear, and anticipation for everything that was yet to come. The night stretched before them, full of unknowns, promises, and possibilities. And for Emily, the locked door that had seemed like a disaster only an hour ago had become the most extraordinary twist of fate. She had been locked out, yes, but she had been unlocked to a world of mystery, danger, and desire, one she was now ready to explore. And as she sipped her wine, feeling the warmth and the thrill of the night, she realized that this was just the beginning of everything she had ever imagined, and more.